Hello guys, welcome to my channel. Today I am doing a review retrospect of Little House on the Prairie Season 1. I apologize immensely for not having any content on my channel. I unfortunately have been recovering from a terrible ear infection. I had to take antibiotics for most of June for 10 days, which took a lot out of me. I am doing much better now, but it just took a lot out of me. I hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July. I know that I did. I hope that everyone out there is being safe during this crazy pandemic. I hope you are wearing a mask. We were able to keep the spread down when we were supposed to stay home, and now we have to wear a mask when we go somewhere, which is totally fine by me because I don't want to get sick again and have to take antibiotics, believe you me. I'm grateful that the antibiotics worked, but I would not recommend taking them. Because like I said before, they took a lot out of me. I apologize that there's not been any Murder, She Wrote episodes posted. Before I got sick, I had done episode 5, It's a Dog's Life, but had messed up the episode numbers. So I recorded it and edited it and put it on there, but YouTube wouldn't let me upload it because they thought that it was a duplication of the last video that I uploaded. So I'll try to do that again. I know what you're thinking. Well, with the pandemic, you should be well past season 1 by now. Well, you would think, but like I said, I got sick and it kind of disrupted all of my plans. Since we've been stuck in and not being able to go anywhere, I decided to treat myself to buying the complete series of Little House on the Prairie. All 9 seasons, including the movies. The movies that they aired after the show ended. And I get to see the episodes in their entirety with no commercials, which is awesome in itself. So, let's get started. For those of you who out there who might not have ever watched or seen Little House on the Prairie, I'll give you a little bit of background on it. It started as a series of books by Laura Ingalls Wilder about her childhood during pioneer days in the late 1800s. So, some of the thing about Little House on the Prairie, if you're a first-time viewer, you pretty much have to take everything with a grain of salt in pretty much every season. Some of it is historically accurate, but the majority of it could be, but also could not be. I will give you several examples of that throughout this review. And I was going to film this on my camera, but it only gives me 18 minutes recording time and it kept cutting me off, so it's better to do it this way. Anyway, Little House on the Prairie started out as a premiere movie and focused on the second book in the series. The first book is Little House in the Big Woods, but the second book is when they moved to Walnut Grove, Minnesota, which is the main location that they use for the show, because I guess they couldn't have the Ingalls family moving around like they did in real life, so they had to have them stay in one location. And Walnut Grove seemed to be the perfect location. And they used to do pilot movies way back when on television. They did it with Murder, She Wrote, they did it with Baywatch, they did it with so many shows. And if the premiere movie had successful ratings, then it became a series. If it didn't, they just said, okay, it was just a movie, no big deal. And they would just write it off as such. Little House on the Prairie officially premiered as a series on September 11th, 1974, and lasted for 9 seasons on NBC. And when it stopped airing on television in 1983, it's never left the air since then. You can watch it on such channel as Hallmark Drama, inspirational channel, uplifting entertainment, and cozy TV. Um, I grew up watching the show and I absolutely love it, and pretty much it is timeless because it's set in the late 1800s. And whenever I watch an episode of Little House on the Prairie, I know the trials and tribulations that the Ingalls family went through, and they did it without the technology that we have today. So, um, if they can get through all of that, we can get through this terrible time that we're going through here in the world with the pandemic going on. Um, Here's some historical facts that Little House on the Prairie fans might not know, and might be um, useful for first-time viewers if you've never seen Little House on the Prairie. Um, like I said before, some of the episodes are based on real things that happened, but the majority of them are not, and they don't follow the life of the actual people. For instance, Mary Ingalls, played by Melissa Sue Anderson, was often sick throughout her whole life and did not get married to a man named Kendall, did not have a baby, and did not ride off into the sunset and live with him for the rest of her life. She was sick more often than she was well. Charles Ingalls, played by Michael Landon in the show, died first. Then Ma died in 1924. Mary was passed to Carrie and died at Carrie's house. There's not much known historically about Carrie Ingalls or Grace Ingalls, unfortunately. And there was no Albert Ingalls. He was created specifically for the show because the actor that played him had also guest starred as young Charles, and Michael Landon thought that he was a really great actor. And they cast his brother on the show as Andy Garvey. So they thought they needed to create a role specifically for him. So they did. Charles had one son, and that was Charles Jr., that was born in Walnut Grove, I think in 1876, and died 9 months later of undetermined causes. And that is portrayed in season 1 in the episode The Lord is My Shepherd. And that's one of my favorite episodes, and one of Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls Wilder's favorite episode as well. Also, the Garveys are completely fiction as well, because Victor French decided to leave the show to pursue other projects, and they created the Garveys so that the Ingalls would have a family as their friends. They get introduced in season 4. But for those of you, for first-time viewers of Little House on the Prairie, might get a little frustrated in season 1. There are a lot of episodes that focus on characters that we never ever see again. They've done this on shows such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Beverly Hills 90210, and so many others, where they introduce a character. This character has a conflict that they have to overcome, and they either start overcoming it and we don't know if they overcome their problem, or they overcome their problem and we don't know what happened to their life after, because they don't appear in another episode ever again. And there are several episodes like that in season 1 of Little House on the Prairie. Not so much in season 2, but a lot in season 1. I love the first episode, Harvest of Friends. I love that Charles takes on too much that he can handle and falls out of a tree, and everyone in town begins helping him. And we don't ever get to see the Irish man that owns the feed store after the first episode. I love Country Girls because that's the episode we get introduced to Nellie Olson. I love Allison Armgard, hopefully I said that right. I read her book, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, and how she became Nellie is a hilarious story. She auditioned for Laura and Mary initially, but did not get either role. And then her father was like, well, why don't you go in and read for this Nellie character? And she reads the script and she's like, but Dad, she's a bitch. And he goes, well, if the boot fits, wear it. So she went in and she does that monologue in the Country Girls episode about having the finest furniture and the greatest furniture in all of Walnut Grove. And apparently she read it so funny, the way that she does on the show, that Michael Landon loved it so much and she got the role of Nellie Oleson. So the rest is history. But of course, when you play such a compelling villain on television, your career is pretty much not a career. But she's fully embraced it, and her book is so great. I think you all should read it. It's so wonderful. And a little insight into that episode, into the episode Town Party, Country Party. In that episode, we get introduced to the character of Olga, who is a girl that was born with one leg shorter than the other. There's a complete emphasis on this character and her playing with the kids and being semi-normal and being Laura's new best friend. And I didn't get the characterization of the father, why he is opposed to Charles helping his daughter and often criticizing her. Oh, you only made one friend and all the other kids laughed at you. It's like, are you secretly Carrie White's father or something, dude? He even goes as far as to beating up Charles when he finds out that Charles secretly has made a shoe for Olga so that she can run and play with the other kids. But this episode was talked about in Allison's book. There's a moment where Laura takes Nellie over to where this crab is in the creek. And she takes her over there, and when Nellie sees it, she's supposed to get so scared she's supposed to fall into the creek, go under, and come back up. And Melissa Gilbert and Allison could not stop laughing because it was so funny. And you can tell that, and they did like a lot of takes of the scene, and you can tell like in the final editing, she's laughing when she spits out the water, or trying not to laugh because it's so funny. Another episode that I really love is The Voice of Tinker Jones, where the grown-ups in town want a new bell for the church/school, because it dubs as a church for worship and a school during the week, where Mary, Laura, Willie, and Nellie go. And the grown-ups in town want a bell. The Olsons are more than willing to pay for the whole thing, but they want a plaque basically stating that they did so. And the other members of the congregation in town just want to contribute their own money and basically say that it's all of their bells and not just, the Olsons' bell or whatever. So eventually it gets heated. The kids can no longer play with each other, and Tinker Jones is a mute man who comes to town and makes pots and pans, and sells them to the Ingalls, and also makes little toy horses for Mary and Laura and little Carrie. And he gets all the kids in town together to make the bell secretly, so the parents don't know. And they all make it together because they want their parents to stop fighting. We unfortunately never see Tinker Jones again. We see the bell, but he's not mentioned as helping make it ever again beyond that episode. A problematic episode, and when I say problematic, I mean it works. There's good performances, but it's also a little frustrating. Is um, if I should wake before I die. This episode features an older woman who has been living with this other older woman who ends up dying, and people are saying such pretty things at her funeral. And the woman is like, I haven't seen my kids in ages. And, you know, oh my goodness, what if I was to say that I died and have them come to my funeral, but I'm not dead? And she's able to convince the Ingalls family to participate in this. She's able to convince Doc Baker and several members of the town to participate in this fake funeral. Her children come and they think that she's dead, and they're like talking and all of that stuff, and then she reveals that she's alive and criticizes them for not coming to see her. And the reason why I say this is problematic is because although it's sweet and it has a really great lesson to it, we never see this woman again. And it's like, my mind goes to, well, when she really died, did they actually believe she was dead, or did, were they like, is she gonna pop out again or something, Believe me, it was one of those moments where I was like that, and it is such a sad and sweet episode. Another episode I really love is Christmas at Plum Creek, where the Ingalls family make gigantic sacrifices so that they can get each other Christmas gifts. Like Laura gives up her horse Bunny so that she can give her mother a beautiful new stove. And I love that episode. It's just so great. And Carrie gets a star for the baby Jesus, but according to the trivia on IMDb, aluminum foil was not invented until 1910, so the star wouldn't look like it does, but we can forgive that. There are a couple bizarre episodes in season 1 upon rewatch that I honestly didn't like. The first one is The Love of Johnny Johnson. He's not a very interesting character. Laura has fallen in love with him, has a crush on him, but he's actually in love with Mary. But Mary doesn't want to give him the time of day, so Laura is angry with her. Then Johnny appears again, of all the characters in season 1 to come back. Why they decided to, put him in it is beyond me. But they have an episode towards the end of season 1 called To See the World. Johnny Johnson comes back and wants to run away to see the world and goes to Mankato with Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards makes it his personal mission to change Johnny's mind about running away, which, in my opinion, is just... It was a boring episode because you don't really care about Johnny Johnson as a character, for one thing, and for another, the Ingalls family only appeared in the first 5 minutes of the episode and the last 5 minutes of the episode, and it has nothing to do with Laura Ingalls Wilder's life as a whole. Another episode that was bizarre was Money Crop. We get introduced to 2 new neighbors that move into town, and one of them is a man who is a farmer. He presents this feed to the farmers that they would have a really good crop with this corn. So the farmers in town all pull their money together to get this feed, and he goes to Mankato. His wife is pregnant, he leaves her behind, and he goes to Mankato to get the feed, and also buys a toy horse that his son or daughter can ride on later on in life. And on the way back, he crashes his wagon and gets stuck underneath it. And the camera zooms 5, 6, 7, almost 10 times on this toy horse that has a creepy face. And he literally talks to it throughout the episode because he has no one else to talk to. Charles eventually finds him, but the men in town have gotten so crazed, thinking that he's stolen their money, that they accost his wife and almost cause her to lose her baby. And and when he comes back, I think the feed is destroyed. I don't know because they never really say. But he decides to move away because they were so mean to his wife. But when he comes out of the house to get in the wagon and move, they're all the neighbors that was being mean to him are now helping him plant his crop. But of course, we never see him again. Another problematic episode, not bizarre but problematic, is School Mom. Mrs. Beadle gets injured when the boys are playing with snakes, and they have Miss Ingalls take over as the teacher. Well, in this episode, you have to suspend your disbelief yet again, because we're introduced to a character that we're supposed to believe was there all along, even though he wasn't. We get introduced to the character named Abel, who's played by the son of the actor on Bonanza who played Hulse. And he looks a lot like him, too. He plays a character that the kids call Dumb Abel, as he's older and he doesn't know how to read. And we're supposed to believe that he's been in Miss Beadle's class this whole entire time, even though we've never seen him up until this episode. And this episode, for those that you want to know, is called School Mom. Caroline decides to make it her personal mission to try to help this boy to learn how to read. And there's all this buildup, all this tension of teaching him to read, and it looks like he's on the verge of reading, but we never know if he ever reads, because he's never seen nor mentioned again after this episode. Another episode that was kind of problematic and is a little dated, and the only episode that's dated, is Child of Pain. This episode deals with child abuse and alcoholism in one full swoop of an episode. And they didn't, in the 1970s, alcoholism was just becoming an issue, and there wasn't a lot of information known about it at the time, especially not as much as we know now. And there was literally nothing known about alcoholism in the 1800s, as far as I know. Basically, this episode feels kind of dated the way that the episode handles the situation. Like, for instance, we know if this guy is beating up on his son, there's no way that he's going to get his son back if this was in modern times. Not only that, the show tries to basically portray that he licks the drinking problem and gets his son back at the end, and we never see them again. But we know now, because of alcoholism and everything associated with it, that they're not going to lick the addiction clean ever. And he would probably never get that kid back, because there's a point where he almost dies, the poor boy. So I kind of didn't like the way that it was portrayed in that particular episode. Another episode I really love is Ma's Holiday, where Caroline and Charles go on sort of a mini vacation, and Mr. Edwards watches the kids while they're gone, and it is just so... It's a hilarious episode because Caroline is worried about them the whole time, and there's so many different, like, subtle things of her missing the children. Like, they go to this play, and it's called Abandoned Daughters, and she's like, I have to live my life, so I have to go now. I won't take care of you anymore, and it's hilarious. At one point, Mr. Edwards nails Carrie to the roof. I also love the season finale called Founders Day, where they do various things in the town for the founding of the town, like a two-legged race, and Ma and Laura wins, and Charles basically lets the old man win in the wood chopping competition. That was good. Family Quarrel was an interesting episode. The Olsens get into an argument when Mrs. Ingalls comes in with her eggs. And Mrs. Olsen gets so mad at Mr. Olsen that she takes the eggs and slams them on top of his head. And I don't know exactly how they were able to do that, because for the simple fact is that, the eggs are running down his face, and that must have been very difficult to film and to do. But for some reason, in this episode, the Ingalls take it upon themselves to try to get the Olsens back together. And they're not particular friends. It's a weird episode, but it's also a funny episode. We had some really great guest stars in season 1 of Little House on the Prairie. And Doctor's Lady, we had Ann Archer. I had always looked at her when I saw that episode and was like, she looks so familiar. And then when I finally saw her name, I was like, oh! For those of you who don't know who she is, she played Michael Douglas's wife that he cheats on with Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. So it was awesome to see her in that. Like I said, we have Ernest Borgnine in The Lord is My Shepherd as Jonathan in an Emmy-winning role. If he didn't get an Emmy, he should have got one. We had Red Buttons in the episode Circus Man, which was a really great performance by him. Ernest Borgnine and Red Buttons both co-starred together in The Poseidon Adventure, which is one of my all-time favorite films. And I'm absolutely happy to see them in something outside of that, because they yelled a lot in that movie, but I love that movie. And also, we had Tracy Savage, who starred in the cult classic film Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. Whenever I would see her in Friday the 13th Part 3, I would think, she looks so familiar, her voice sounds so familiar. And watching season 1 for the first time in a long time in its entirety, she's in it. Unfortunately, she disappears by season 2, but yeah, it was nice to see her in that. She plays Christy, Mary's best friend. Another episode I particularly liked was the raccoon episode. Laura's glass doll gets broke and Mary replaces it with a raccoon. That could go rapid, but any time that you watch an episode where Laura could possibly die, just remember that there's literally no suspense there, because she lived to the age of 90 and wrote the Little House books, so she's not going to die. But of course the show had to build up some tension. Another episode that was really good was Plague. A bunch of people in town get some flour, I think, that rats have been laying on, and they have like fleas or something, and a bunch of people in town get sick. This episode has nothing to do with Laura as a whole, but since Charles is helping a lot of the sick, he can't go home. And this episode is famous for having Michael Landon's daughter, Leslie Landon, play one of the girls whose family has died from this terrible plague. And I'm not sure if her character dies or not, but it was a particularly hard scene for Michael Landon to film. Overall, season 1 of Little House on the Prairie is rough around the edges, but it's entertaining and timeless and classic. I absolutely love the lessons, and the acting is top-notch in every single episode. Victor French as Mr. Edwards is just so awesome, especially when he comes back in Mr. Edward's Homecoming, and the introduction of Grace, which will eventually become his wife later on in season 2. But Little House on the Prairie is a really great show, and I love it. And I'm so happy that I have the complete series on DVD so that I can watch it whenever the mood strikes me. And I love this show. Tell me what your favorite episodes were in the comments below, and depending on the views I get on this, I might do a review retrospect of season 2 and pretty much all the seasons. And maybe I'll even do that with Murder, She Wrote. Maybe it will be easier than doing each individual episode. I don't know. Because I'm also enjoying Murder, She Wrote too. It's awesome to see it with no commercials as well. Anyway, I hope you all have a good day or night, depending on whenever you watch this, and I hope you enjoyed my review of Little House on the Prairie Season 1. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.